The rain fell heavily that night, masking the faint whispers that seemed to crawl out of the shadows. Peter sat by the window of his dimly lit home, his fingers nervously drumming on the table. His wife Amanda was upstairs, humming a lullaby that sounded strangely ancient. It wasn't just the storm outside that unsettled him, it was the way her voice echoed unnaturally through the house. He couldn't explain why he felt this way. Amanda was perfect. Too perfect. She had swept into his life like a summer breeze, and within 3 months they were married. But ever since their wedding night, Peter had begun to notice things, strange things. Peter had always been cautious in love. His friends mocked him for it, calling him a hopeless romantic who didn't trust romance. Then Amanda appeared. They met at a charity gala, and she was stunning, a vision in red, with eyes that seemed to pierce through his soul. Her smile was magnetic, her laugh enchanting, and her touch electric. Their whirlwind romance was the stuff of fairy tales. But fairy tales, Peter would soon learn, often had dark, twisted endings. 2 weeks after their wedding, Peter found Amanda staring at an old photograph. Her expression was blank, her fingers tracing the face of a man he didn't recognize. "Who's that?" he asked, leaning over her shoulder. Amanda flinched, her body stiffening unnaturally. She turned the photo face down and smiled. A smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Just an old friend," she said softly. But that night, Peter couldn't sleep. He found himself haunted by Amanda's distant expression and the icy coldness of her touch when she kissed him goodnight. A month into their marriage, Peter's unease grew. He noticed Amanda never seemed to sleep. She would lie next to him perfectly still, her eyes half open as if she were listening to something far away. When he'd ask, she'd brush it off with a laugh. One night, Peter woke up to find her side of the bed empty. The clock read 3:17 a.m. He crept downstairs and found Amanda sitting on the floor, surrounded by lit candles, mumbling in a language he didn't recognize. "Amanda?" he called out. She turned sharply, her eyes glowing faintly in the candlelight. For a brief moment, her face didn't look like hers. It was gaunt, almost skeletal. "Go back to bed," she said, her voice lower, colder than usual. Peter didn't argue. The next day, while Amanda was out, Peter decided to investigate. He'd never been the paranoid type, but something about his wife wasn't adding up. In the attic, hidden behind an old wardrobe, Peter found a door he'd never noticed before. It was locked, but after a bit of force, it creaked open. The smell hit him first, a sickly sweet scent that made his stomach churn. Inside, the walls were lined with photographs, dozens of them, all of men, some smiling, some frowning, but all eerily similar. Amanda stood beside each of them. Peter's heart raced as he spotted the photograph she'd been looking at weeks ago. He flipped it over and saw a name scrawled on the back: Michael, deceased. That night, Peter couldn't hide his fear anymore. "Who are they, Amanda?" "The men in the photographs." Ash pushed off from the table. She stared at him, her face expressionless. "They're my past, Peter. You shouldn't have gone looking." Her tone sent shivers down his spine. Before he could press further, the lights flickered and a faint whisper filled the room. "Run, Peter," it seemed to say. Amanda smiled. "Do you hear that? The storm must be playing tricks on you." But Peter knew better. Over the next few days, Peter became obsessed. He visited the local library, searching for anything about Amanda's past. To his horror, he found an article buried in the archives. "Disappearance of wealthy businessman linked to bride," it read. The photograph attached showed Amanda, though she went by a different name. The article detailed a series of disappearances, men who had married her, only to vanish within months. The last line sent a chill down his spine. Locals claim the woman is cursed, a bride of death, luring her victims to their doom. Peter confronted Amanda that night. "Who are you? What are you?" Amanda tilted her head, her expression cold. "I'm your wife, Peter. Isn't that enough?" "No," he shouted. "You've been lying to me. Those men in the photos, you killed them, didn't you?" Her eyes darkened, and for the first time, Peter saw something truly inhuman in her gaze. "I warned you not to look," she hissed. "I heard you get Paul's record." Suddenly, the room grew colder, and the whispers returned, louder, more insistent. Peter backed away as Amanda's figure seemed to shift and flicker, her skin turning pale, her eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. "Run, Peter," the voices screamed. Peter bolted out of the house, his heart pounding as Amanda's laughter echoed behind him. It wasn't her usual laugh. It was guttural, hollow, and filled with malice. The rain lashed against his face as he stumbled into the street, desperately searching for help. Behind him, the house stood ominously dark, but Peter swore he could see Amanda standing in the window, her glowing eyes fixed on him. He reached for his phone, hands trembling, and called his best friend, James. "James, I need your help. Amanda, she's not human," I said. There was silence on the other end before James finally said, "Peter, calm down. Where are you?" Peter gave him his location, but before he could explain further, the call cut off. His phone screen flickered, then went black. The whispers returned, swirling around him like a malevolent wind. Peter ran aimlessly until he stumbled into a diner on the edge of town. Soaked and trembling, he collapsed into a booth. The place was eerily empty, save for an older man sitting at the counter nursing a cup of coffee. "You look like you've seen a ghost," the man said, his voice gravelly. Peter hesitated before blurting out, "It's my wife. She's not who I thought she was. She's a monster." The man's expression darkened. "Amanda?" he asked, his tone suddenly serious. Peter froze. "How? How do you know her?" The man set his cup down and leaned in. "You're not the first, son. I've seen her before, many times, always the same story. Young men, full of life, swept off their feet by a woman too perfect to be real. And then they disappear." "Who is she?" Peter whispered. "She's cursed," the man replied, "bound to the undead. She feeds on the living, trapping their souls to sustain her own. If you've married her, boy, you're already marked." Peter instinctively touched the back of his neck, where he'd noticed a strange crescent-shaped scar a few days after his wedding. He'd thought it was nothing, a scratch or a burn. But now, he wasn't so sure. "What can I do?" he asked, his voice trembling. The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a small vial of what looked like black liquid. "This is ash water, made from the bones of the undead. It's the only thing that can sever her hold on you. But you'll have to act fast. The longer you wait, the harder it will be to escape." Peter took the vial, his mind racing. "Why are you helping me?" The man's gaze hardened. "Because she killed my son." Peter knew he had to face Amanda, but the thought of returning to that house filled him with dread. Still, he had no choice. The longer he stayed away, the more dangerous she would become. When he stepped inside, the house was silent, eerily so. The air was heavy and the faint smell of decay lingered. He gripped the vial tightly, his heart hammering in his chest. "Amanda," he called out, his voice shaky. She appeared at the top of the stairs, her white nightgown billowing as if caught in an invisible wind. Her eyes glowed faintly, and her smile sent chills down his spine. "Peter," she said sweetly, "I was worried about you. Where have you been?" Peter stepped back as she descended the stairs. "I know what you are, Amanda. I know what you've done to those men." "Henry!" Her smile faltered, and for the first time, Peter saw a flicker of sadness in her eyes. "You weren't supposed to find out," she said softly. "Why?" he demanded. Why do you do it?" Her face twisted and she let out a low growl. "Because I have to. I didn't choose this, Peter. I was cursed long before you were born. Every man I love dies, and their souls keep me alive." Peter held up the vial. "Not this time." Amanda's eyes widened, and she let out a piercing scream that shook the walls. The whispers returned, louder and more insistent, as if the house itself was alive. Peter uncorked the vial and began to pour the black liquid into a circle around him, just as the old man had instructed. Amanda lunged at him, her features twisting into something monstrous. Her once beautiful face now looked decayed, her skin pale and cracked, her teeth sharp and glistening. "You can't stop me," she screeched, clawing at the invisible barrier the ash water created. Peter chanted the words the old man had taught him, his voice shaking but determined. "By the ash of the forgotten, by the bones of the damned, I sever your hold. I free your victims. Leave this world." Amanda let out a blood-curdling scream as her body began to disintegrate, turning to ash before his eyes. The whispers grew deafening, then suddenly, silence. When it was over, Peter collapsed to the floor, tears streaming down his face. The house was still, and Amanda was gone. He sat there for hours, too stunned to move, until the first rays of dawn peeked through the windows. But as he stood to leave, he noticed something on the floor. Another photograph, one he hadn't seen before. It was of Amanda, smiling, standing next to another man. On the back it read, "Peter, deceased." Who left the photograph? Is Amanda truly gone, or is Peter still trapped in her web of death? Stay tuned for the chilling conclusion in Part 2.